book does a good job covering the texts about Piaget's theories of development. There's a lot of good YouTube videos out there, but if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer those. But what I want to sort of talk about, and to give some anecdotal as well as, research experience, is to talk about development before we're even into this world. So I just want to acknowledge that this class will acknowledge the topic of sex, but we're going to focus on the biological aspects of conceptions and beyond only. So I just want to say as a disclaimer, if people feel uncomfortable, you don't have to watch this and you can feel free at any point. So this is a picture of me and my husband and my tiny little baby, Olive. Well, when she was tiny, and that was about a year ago. She was a week old. So I've sort of recently experienced some of the things we've talked about. So what we're going to talk about is prenatal development. So what's the nature of development before birth and what factors can affect a child during the mother's pregnancy. So one thing that I think is so fascinating is that prenatal development is defined as the period of growth between conception and birth. And what that means is that one single cell is transformed into this beautiful, complex human being. So in that process, you start with one cell, but there are three phases: the zygote, the embryo, and the fetus phase. So I'm going to show this to you with different representations. So we'll see a couple of visual cartoons. We're going to see a really cool video that shows a week-by-week ultrasound of a developing baby. But I'll sort of walk you through each step. So the zygote phase is when it's within the first 2 weeks, or when during prenatal development, and there's a zygote during the germinal period, and that's when it attaches to the uterine wall and forms what we call a blastocyst. And it's going to separate by the end of the germinal period, so the end of the first 2 weeks after conception. It's going to separate into two parts: an embryo and a placenta. And this is important because the placenta supports the life of the embryo. The embryo, in the embryonic period, occurs between weeks 2 and 8 after fertilization. And during that period, you just see the basic body structures and primitive organs forming. So the lungs, the liver, the heart, the brain, all of those, the kidneys, all of those basic functions that you need to survive. And what happens after weeks 9, so through birth, is when, and it's a fetus, is when you're refining structures so that the infant can survive outside of the womb. And what I think is remarkable here is that during the time when the fetus is growing, or during the fetal period, the infant, or the growing human is no longer relying. Interesting is that during the first, there are different phases of pregnancy, and I'll review this later, but during the first trimester, the first 3 months of a pregnancy, you're building a placenta to support a fetus. So women are often very tired because it takes so much work for your body to build this placenta to support the growing human. And when you get to the fetal period, the placenta has already been created, and it's functioning, and it's supporting this fetus so that they can not only begin to use the basic body structures, but they can refine them so that they're able to survive outside of the womb. So here's another cartoon picture that I think is really helpful. It's a visualization of sort of looking at prenatal development. But before I go into the details, I think it's important to note that prenatal development occurs across the lifespan of developing human. And what you can see is that some organs and body structures continue to develop, whereas others have specific stages of development. So let's take, for example, the eyes. The eyes begin to form around 4.5 weeks, so that's in the embryonic period, right, when it's an embryo, and they develop all the way to full term. Same thing with the central nervous system. Begins developing around 3 weeks, and then to full term. However, and the external genitalia, when you look at things like the heart develops 3.5 weeks to 9 weeks. So there's a increased risk of miscarriage in the first trimester, which is the first 3 months. And that's partially due to birth defects of the heart or other major organs that support an infant. There are many other reasons, but I think it's important to sort of note and think about that. This also talks about ears and teeth and the palate, which is the top part of the mouth, the lower limbs, the upper limbs. So what I hope that this picture is sort of illustrating, and to go back one slide, is that it's a fetus at 9 weeks, meaning it has all the basic structures. So the eyes are continuing to develop. So a lot of babies that are born premature, meaning more than 2 weeks before their due date, often will have visual problems because their eyes and their central nervous system did not have enough time to develop, or their lungs didn't have enough time to develop. So this is a cartoon of this is from a different textbook. It's from a child development textbook. Excuse me, human development textbooks. So here you can see these are the fallopian tubes right there, and there's the uterus. This tiny little spot is the embryo, and that bump is the developing placenta, which could also be called a yolk sac. Well, this is pictures from my first ultrasound, and I was about 6 weeks pregnant at that point. You can see the yolk sac here, and the embryo. And I think that this is a really amazing sort of picture of it. And you can't see this because you didn't get to see the video of it, but you could see this tiny little ball flickering. And if we go back, the heart starts developing at 3.5 weeks. You can only see that the heart is beating on the ultrasound around 6 weeks. But when you go back for your 20-week ultrasound, you can see the 4 chambers of the heart developing. So I think that's really amazing. So now I've posted this, but I really want you to watch this video about the ultrasounds across pregnancy. And it's the same mom and baby, walk you through week by week. So that's 40 weeks. And you'll be able to see the baby growing and developing and the features that are being refined. So I hope you enjoy that video. And then you get to see what it looks like after it's born. Yeah, so enjoy. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about pregnancy. They say, 9 calendar months, but some people say 10 months. It's actually 40 weeks. It's divided into trimesters, so first trimester, second trimester, third trimester. And as I said before, the first trimester women are typically very tired because they're building their placenta, and that takes a lot of work on your body, whereas in the second trimester, women tend, so this is, take this with a grain of salt there are individual differences, to feel more energy, because the baby is being supported by your placenta, and your body has to do work in other ways, but not building the placenta. The journey of pregnancy. So you can see here in the first trimester, there are a lot of changes in a woman's body. So it's primarily, the baby is very small in the first trimester. In the second one, they um, they grow and they take up a significant amount of space. But if you look and see in the third trimester, so before you're pregnant, a woman's uterus is the size of a fist. By the time you are at the end of your pregnancy, your uterus is the size of a soccer ball. So there's all the organs in your body and everything gets moved around. So it's a really amazing process of what goes on in our body. And it's important for women to gain weight. So they gain it in many ways. A lot of the amniotic fluid that supports the baby, your uterus grows 2 pounds, the placenta that's supporting the baby itself. You have, I think at one point, the nurse told me that you are pumping twice as much blood in your body because you're supporting another human being. There's fluid retention. So it's important to note that along with these changes that happen during pregnancy, you see physical changes that happen, and that it's healthy to gain weight. And I'm going to play something for you. And if I were seeing you in person, I would say, does anyone know what that sound is? But I can't. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to play it for you, and then I'll tell you what, or I'll tell you what it is. It's the first time I heard my daughter's heartbeat. This was around 12 weeks. So here you go. So I love hearing that sound. It's really amazing, and it sounds like hoofbeats. So this was me when I was 4 months pregnant, and this was me maybe about a week or two before she was born. So you can see that there are significant changes there. And the next thing I want to go to is what influences the health of the baby and the baby's development. So there's something called tetragens, which is anything that you can ingest or that is put into your body that can produce a birth defect or alter in a negative way the development of the baby. So this can come from a drug, chemical, a virus. So this can present in many different forms. Mother's nutrition and illness is emotional state, use of drugs. So what you are allowed to take medicine-wise is restricted. There's a huge debate out there and a really nice movement about looking at the use of depression drugs and or anxiety medicine and how to balance that with whether a woman should take them or not, because sometimes they've found that the stress of not taking the meds can be just as detrimental to the fetus. Alcohol is a big one. Children can get fetal alcohol syndrome. Nicotine. Here are some other examples here. So let's just take two. For example, rubella. That's the German measles disease that it can cause blindness, deafness, heart abnormalities, or stillborn. If a person's health, or if they're younger than 18, they're more likely to have a premature baby or increased Down syndrome. Same thing of increase in Down syndrome if the mother is older than 35. Alcohol. There are all sorts of ways to think about this. And what I want to show you to sort of wrap this up is a cartoon and a chart that sort of looks at prenatal development. So in these first 2 weeks here, we've got the germinal period, right? So the cell divides, it forms a blastocyst, and becomes an embryo. So from this to this phase, we can see here that this is a very sensitive period right here. So, and it's sensitive because if you think back about that the cartoon of the baby and with the eyes that were developing starting at 4.5 to a week, that this, if the structures don't have are not formed properly, or the organs are not formed properly, they're more likely to have a defect and cause problems. And if you look at these figures right here, you can see all these little dots, which could be problem areas. So, and these bars can mean that it's a highly sensitive period and it can happen at any point along the weeks here. So, when the lips are being developed and the palate, remember I talked about the palate on the top of the mouth, really it's only highly sensitive within the first 6 weeks or so. And if you look at brain development here, brain development is really highly sensitive up until, think about 24 weeks. And that is partially because 24 weeks is the year, or sorry, excuse me, in the week in which an infant is viable if they're born outside of the womb. Yeah, so I think that this chart does a nice job of sort of giving the general sense of what is highly sensitive, so what is more critical to the functioning and development of the infant versus the idea of a less sensitive period. So if an infant's eyes are not necessarily fully developed, there are ways that we can intervene and help them function in the outside of the womb. So glasses for eyes, right? Or treatment for it. Okay. So that is me right after Olive was born. And I want to just do one quick thing about caring for your newborn. There are different states of arousal: crying, alert, and sleep. So I'll show you a little bit of a clip of Olive when she was a teeny tiny baby. She's obviously asleep. And squeaky and cute. And so now I will just show you sort of 2 different levels of alert. And she's about a week old there. And this is sort of a different level of being alert. She's not quite asleep, but she's not awake and looking up. And
So the last thing that I really sort of want to talk about is reflexes. So reflexes are unlearned involuntary responses that occur in the presence of a particular stimuli. So if you tap a baby's down here, if you tap a baby's cheek or sort of pull on it, the rooting reflex, and they're hungry, they'll turn in the direction of where you touch. The Moro or the startle reflex, they'll immediately put their hands up and their legs out. The Babinski, if you sort of stroke the bottom of their foot, their toes will fan out. They automatically suck on things. The grasping reflex, they can't let go. And in contrast, I just want to sort of really highlight the idea of voluntary movements. So, around 3 months, they start rolling over and moving their body. And by voluntary, there means that they are actively participating in this. So the reflexes in an infant start disappearing around 3 months. And then, different babies have sort of different tracks, but generally they go from belly time, rolling over, to sitting, to standing, sort of cruising, being able to do what they call a pincher grasp, which is using their thumb and their finger to standing, walking, building, walking up steps, and then jumping around too. So that's what we have for today, and thank you very much.